This story name is The Whistler in the Walls. Late one evening, as the wind howled outside, Grace sat curled up on the couch, trying to forget the events of the day. Her new apartment, though charming, felt unnervingly empty. The walls creaked, the floorboards groaned under every step she took, and the silence seemed to press in on her like a weight she couldn't shake. At first, Grace chalked it up to the usual noises that came with old buildings, pipes shifting, the house settling. But after a few days, something else began to happen. It started with a soft sound, barely perceptible at first, but gradually growing louder as the nights wore on. It was a faint, eerie whistle, the kind someone might hum in a dark alleyway, or in the depths of an abandoned house. At first, she dismissed it as the wind, or the neighbor's late-night TV show playing too loudly. But no matter how many times she checked, there was no one else in the building. The whistling always came from the same spot, the wall near the kitchen. It was a low, mournful tune, like something from an old lullaby, but twisted and off-key. Grace tried to ignore it, tried to pretend it was nothing more than her imagination playing tricks. But the sound grew more distinct with each passing night. One evening, unable to bear it any longer, Grace decided to investigate. She grabbed a flashlight and approached the wall where the whistling seemed to originate. The apartment was cold, colder than usual, and the air felt thick, heavy. With trembling hands, she pressed her ear to the wall. There it was again, the faint whistle, so close it felt like it was coming from right inside her head. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice shaky. The whistling stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, as if in response to her question, there came a sound, a soft scraping noise like nails running across a chalkboard. It started slow, then quickened, until it became a frantic scratching, coming from inside the wall. Grace stumbled backward, heart racing. She had to get out. She had to leave. But just as she turned to go, something changed. The air grew thick, suffocating, and the lights flickered. The whistling started again, louder this time, followed by a low, guttural voice, as if it were coming from beneath the floorboards. "Let me out!" The words echoed in her mind, reverberating through the walls. Grace's breath caught in her throat. She backed away from the wall, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Before she could even think to flee, the sound came again, louder, sharper, and now unmistakable. "Let me out, Grace!" Her heart stopped. The voice, it was her own. Panicked, she sprinted to the front door, but when she reached the hallway, everything changed. The hallway, once familiar, was now twisted, stretching in unnatural angles. The door was no longer in sight. In the distance, the whistling started again, but this time it was different. It was her own voice, singing that same eerie lullaby from the walls, beckoning her deeper into the dark. "Let me out! Let me out!" Grace turned to flee, but the walls around her began to pulse, and the cold air turned suffocating. Suddenly, the light overhead burst, plunging the apartment into total darkness, and through the silence came the final whisper. So close to her ear, she could feel it, like ice on her skin. "Welcome home, Grace." And that was the last anyone ever heard from her. They say, late at night, you can still hear the faint whistling in the walls of her old apartment building, and sometimes, if you listen closely enough, you'll hear a voice, asking to be let out.